All right, I'm going to get going. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for joining us tonight for our college athletic recruiting Zoom call. My name is Joe Kinney. I am a college counselor at the Pingry School. I also have a title of the college athletic recruiting coordinator, essentially someone that is on staff to support our student athletes in guidance throughout the recruiting process. What that means is more just talking to them about the process as opposed to sports specific um, uh, guidance, if you would. I was a college baseball coach for 30 years, so I do have experience, but baseball is my expertise from an athletic standpoint. If you can call it expertise, I'm not sure, but um, I'm not really qualified to talk about a field hockey player or a soccer player in terms of their ability to play at the college level. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm very honored tonight to have two guests with me, two former colleagues who are now head coaches. And let me just do a quick introduction of both. I have Coach Dennis Bond, who is the head men's soccer coach at Lafayette College, and Coach Lauren Morton, who is the head women's lacrosse coach at Boston University. So welcome, Dennis, and welcome, Lauren. Thank you.
Hey, Joe.
Thanks.
So just a quick bio on both, not to embarrass them. So Coach Bond just recently completed his 26th season at Lafayette with the men's soccer program, including the past 24 as the head soccer coach. Under Coach Bond, the Leopards have compiled a 197, 156, and 84 record, which includes 3 Patriot League titles and 3 NCAA tournament berths. Prior to Lafayette, Coach Bond spent 1998 on the sidelines as an assistant at his alma mater, Columbia University. He graduated from Columbia in 1998 with a degree in political science and was a 4-year member and captain of the soccer team, earning all Ivy honors as a senior. Coach Bond also played basketball at Columbia, interestingly enough, impressively enough. Coach Lauren Morton is entering her 7th season as the head coach at Boston University. The former BU lacrosse All-American was named the 4th head coach in program history and has led the Terriers to 3 Patriot League tournament appearances, while BU has garnered 17 All-Patriot League selections. Prior to taking the helm at BU, Coach Morton held assistant positions at Lafayette, where I first met Lauren, BU, Georgetown, and most recently at Duke University, where she was the associate head coach. Lauren graduated from BU in 2008 with a degree in psychology, and as a midfielder and captain with the lacrosse program, she led the Terriers to 4 straight America East East championships and 4 NCAA tournament appearances. So we have 2 very qualified coaches here to share their recruiting experiences tonight. All right. So this is just a little bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm going to just go through a brief recruiting, what I call absolutes. We'll get into the gist of the evening with a discussion with our coaches, and then I'll end with just Pingry resources that we have to provide support for our student athletes. Okay, some recruiting absolutes. I'm going to go through this quickly because we'll cover a lot of this tonight. Student athletes need to own the process. They're the ones that are going to be playing and attending college, not parents. So they need to drive the communication. They need to drive the ship as they move through the recruiting process. Parents are an important part of the process, but their advisors, support network, the student athlete owns the process. Recruiting is a two-way street. Colleges and coaches recruit student athletes, but student athletes also recruit colleges, coaches, and programs. Academic and athletic development should go without saying. That's obviously something that's very important throughout their high school journey, developing themselves as young men or women. Academic and athletic fit, we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. There is a lot of support at Pingry to help with that, both on the academic side and the athletic side. I'll cover that a little bit as well. Notice for both of those bullets, I have academics first, not athletics first. So that needs to really be the foremost part of the process. Do your homework. There's a lot of research, a lot of ability to do some research on colleges, programs, coaches, etc. It's very frustrating when I get someone visiting me, and when I was in Coach Bond's and Coach Morton's chairs, and they walk in the office and say, "Coach, what conference does your team play in? How many pitchers do you have on your team?" All stuff that's very easily identified on a website. All right. The other thing you can do say you're a swimmer and you swim the freestyle and you're looking at XYZ school, you can look at the roster. If every swimmer who swims the freestyle is 6'2", chances are that coach wants guys who are 6'2" or higher or taller to swim the freestyle. So that's ways to do homework that's really easy with all the resources at your fingertips. Uh, I put Division I and Division III down there. There are also Division II. There's also NAIA. There's also junior college. Almost all Pingry student athletes going back many, many years have competed in college, who have competed in college have done so at the Division I or the Division III levels. Tremendous opportunities at both. There are some differences in terms of the recruiting rules, but also what those programs can do with their student athletes throughout the year, during the college seasons. NCAA rules, there's a wealth of information to educate student athletes and parents on the NCAA rules. Coaches typically will do that as well. College coaches take advantage of those resources. Consider your options as you get deeper into the recruiting process. Chances are you'll have multiple options, and it pays you dividends to consider all options as best you possibly can. Scholarship realities, roughly 2% of high school student athletes ultimately get some type of scholarship. So most sports, with few exceptions, offer, for lack of a better term, partial scholarships. So if you have 30 baseball players on a team, very rarely will you have 30 players on full scholarship. Currently, that does not exist. That may change. There are some changes in the works. Until that does change, which it could be as early as next summer, from what I understand, um, with the exception of football, men's and women's basketball, women's volleyball, I think women's tennis, there might be one other women's sport. All sports are partial scholarship sports. And probably the last thing, but one of the most important, as you navigate the recruiting process, be organized. Keep a notebook, keep a spreadsheet or an Excel sheet of some sort that organizes your communications, what coaches are asking for, what information you've sent, what your last date of communication was, so on and so forth, so you know what you're saying to each school. Very frustrating when I was the head coach at Lafayette College as the baseball coach, and I got an email from somebody saying, "Dear Coach Kinney, it was great visiting Lehigh University the other day." Chances are I probably wasn't going to respond to that young man ever again. So be organized. That pays dividends and it makes an impression. Okay, those are my basic absolutes. I am going to get into a discussion with Coach Bond and Coach Morton. I'm going to roughly follow this outline here. I'm going to ask them first the recruiting philosophies, then ask some questions kind of based on the process, if you would. And then the last four bullets, if we have time, just kind of cover that and see what their perspectives are. So, Lauren, if I could start out with you, can you give me a sense of a general recruiting philosophy that you may have for your lacrosse program?
For sure. So I think certainly recruiting has evolved and changed, especially in our sport, both on the men's and the women's side. But I think that first and foremost, I think for us, recruiting starts with it starts with the person. Like who are we recruiting? Who are we bringing into the program? I think that really getting to know and understand who the student athlete is, who their family is, what their background, what their goals are, what do they want to achieve out of their college experience, I think is kind of first and foremost one of the key things. And then I also think I think fit is probably a word we use a lot in our process of just being able to, again, it has to be a fit for us, but also a fit for the student athlete. And I think that they have to know what our goals are, what our campus is about, what the academic piece is about. And so I think a lot of that is in that relationship building. I think that that's been certainly challenging in our sport where things are really accelerated and are happening within a quick time period. But I think overall, I think for us as coaches, when our players are they're happy, they're thriving, they're comfortable. Doesn't mean it's easy, but I think that when they certainly feel supported and in a place that they are really happy, I think we're able to get the most out of them and challenge them. And I think that that comes by having really informed decisions and us getting to know them and them really getting to know So I think that from kind of just the relationship piece, that's where I would start. I would say, just philosophically, I say this to kind of high schoolers all the time, of like, you have to run your own race. You have to be willing to understand your process is going to look different than your club teammate or some other people that are maybe at your high school. And I think that finding this is one of the most influential decisions that you can make in your life, and the opportunities and doors it can open. And so I think that being able to just run your own race and focus on your own process is really important, overall, just from a philosophical standpoint, from someone who went through it and then just continues to kind of see players going through it each year.
Thank you very much. Tremendous. Dennis, would you share your recruiting philosophy for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Lauren, it's very much on the person. On our recruiting board where we put the names and the positions, we have three letters OKG, our kind of guy. Like we have like a vision. I can't put words to it. It's kind of like I always joke, the Supreme Court definition of pornography. You know it when you see it, right? Like we know our kind of guy when we see it, right? It's something that we don't necessarily, again, put in words. We don't have a size, tall, short, fast, slow. Like, we just have like our kind of guy. And so during the recruiting process, I have a term that I use also when we're scouting opponents, but paint a picture. Like I want my assistants to help me paint a picture of who this person is, what their background's like, what are their priorities, what's their focus, what are their goals, what is their character and their family background, and kind of all those, the work ethic and personality. And so, focusing on what we know has worked in the past here in our program, and then helping my assistants try to paint that picture through evaluations, but a lot of it's not necessarily on the field evaluation.
Great, thank you. You both kind of touched on relationships to some degree, and really that's what coaching is really is relationships. And what's unique about college coaching is that relationship starts when maybe they're 16 years old, and it can go for the rest of your life. And as a former college coach, I cherish those relationships, and that starts with the recruiting process and getting to know the people that you're going to be working with, because you're going to be spending an incredible amount of time with them, and you want to not necessarily like them right away, I guess, but certainly respect them and have them earn your respect, and you know support the goals that your group, your organization, your team is certainly supporting. Um, okay. All right. So, Lauren, I'll start with you first. How do you build your lists of prospective student athletes?
Yeah, I think that for us in our world, and in our sport, I think that there's a lot of different opportunities, whether it's through camps and clinics, whether it's camps and clinics that we hold on campus. Our staff and our sport, there's a lot of different evaluation opportunities through those camps and clinics, and then certainly through the tournaments. I would say that that's kind of where we first start, of just being able to get to know someone, to see them play. I think that as kind of recruiting cycles evolve each year, I think we certainly look at emails. I think that just with the volume of emails that come in now, I think that being able to watch all of the film and things like that is a little bit different. But I think definitely the in person, and on campus contacts through camps and clinics are really where we start to kind of build those lists and at those showcases.
Okay, so Dennis, sort of related, how can a student athlete get on your radar? How early can that start? Certainly there are rules there, but
Yeah, I mean, sport to sport, I think, women's lacrosse is probably way ahead of men's soccer in regards to the timing of evaluating a student athlete, and then even an offer or commitment. We're kind of a little bit slower in the process as as an infrastructure, I guess, from a men's soccer standpoint. But I think, having kids reach out via email, though we do get a lot of them, it's still a way for us to at least start to put them into our database, start to kind of, do a little bit of research on them depending on their age and the background of the resume. But ultimately, either getting seen by us because you're being proactive, and that may be coming to an ID clinic or to a camp or to an environment where we're going to be there, or the stars align where we're able to get out and see you play in a high school game, a club game, or any type of competition that's available. So, it is a little bit, can be organized at times and it can be figured out, but sometimes it's a little random. But I think, as you said earlier, getting the communication out to the coaches at the schools that you feel like might be the right fit, and starting that process and then being consistent with that, is probably my biggest recommendation.
And I'm sure you both, in fact, I know you both use some sort of online recruiting questionnaire on your website to collect information on student athletes.
Yes. So certainly with kind of just the online servers that I know our compliance and university has, that we have online questionnaires that allow, it's nice because it puts players' profiles right into our recruiting system, and then as a part of our email listserv. So they're able to kind of get updates on kind of what camps and clinics we're running.
And student athletes can fill that out as early as ninth grade, correct?
Exactly. So if they have a place that they know they're really interested in, or to be able to get on their communications, that's the easiest way to kind of get in their email list serve.
Okay. So you both mentioned camps, ID camps, and I think I know the answer to this as well, but do you both run your camps, and what does that mean? Because a lot of people will get invited to camps, and I'll get a lot of questions. Is it worth it to do this? How do you look at the camp? Do you run your camps, and how maybe do you run them? I guess would be the best way to ask that. Dennis, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, we do it with multiple schools. So, we try to make sure that there isn't just a financial commitment just to Lafayette. It's a financial commitment the family's making to be seen or evaluated by a large amount of schools. And so, I think there is that variety that gives the experience, not just a one option. From that experience, we do bring in players every year. Is it 100% of the players we bring from those clinics? No. But is there some years 50 or more percent? If we bring in 8 players, maybe we might have 4 or more there. Other years, we maybe just have 1 or 2. It just, again, depends on the year. But there's no doubt that there's players that I've coached in my career and even on our current team that are starting for us that I had never seen in my life until they came to a clinic. And so sometimes it's that random, or sometimes it's a kid that we've seen play, but we just really feel like if we're going to make a commitment to them, especially financially, then we want them to come where we can spend a little bit more one-on-one time with them.
Yeah, I would
Lauren?
totally agree. Just kind of based on what Dennis said, I do think, to something you said, Joe, to start, like, it is in our databases, you have the ability to send emails with someone's first name and say, we'd love to have you at a clinic. I think I hear from a lot of people like, oh, I got a personal invitation. And I think that that's really important for families to understand that a lot of times, like, you can't personally invite based on NCAA rules. And so I think that at times it is important to know, is this who will be there? I think you can figure out with some of the camps and clinics what coaches will be represented there. Is it an assistant coach? Is it a volunteer coach, or is it the head coach? I think to be able to make sure that it's worth, again, I think worth your while from a financial standpoint. But camps can be, I think we feel really strongly we want to be able to coach and work with the majority of the players before we do make a decision, just to be able to really get to them and see what they're like on field. How do they receive feedback? How do they work with other people that may not just be their high school or their club teammates? So we do find those opportunities incredibly beneficial.
Yeah, from a baseball perspective, this is going back a couple of years, and I tell student athletes this now. Yes, you might have to go to a number of camps to reach a number of schools, but you can be almost guaranteed you're going to have the opportunity to play in front of the head coach and maybe the entire coaching staff. And if you perform, that's going to be noticed. The other thing that's kind of important, I think, with camps, you get to interact usually, depending on the camp, with current student athletes. So you can kind of get a sense of maybe the culture of the program, their academic commitments, how they manage both, whatever that may be, which I always felt was beneficial for student athletes in the recruiting process. Um, Related, but shifting gears a little bit, um, do you use third-party recruiting services? Sports specific, baseball has a lot of that, or just generic, like NCSA would be a generic, I guess, third-party recruiting site where people can sign up. There's always a free level, and then you can pay for whatever kind of consultation, I guess. Um, Dennis, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, no, we don't have any specific kind of platform that we would say has been beneficial to us or that we would recommend to any recruit to use. Uh, so I feel like what's necessary, at least from a men's soccer perspective, and I think for a lot of other sports in our department, a family and a young person can organize what we need as college coaches by themselves. Whether that be just writing the email, updating us with their schedule, getting us their transcripts, sending us a YouTube video, all the things that a third party service could potentially provide, I believe a family and a student athlete could do by themselves.
Lauren?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that one of the things that's hard to watch now, just in kind of our seat, is I think just taking advantage of parents and saying, you need this, you need to pay for this, you need to pay for this service. I think that we don't use any third party. Certainly, our sport has something through Sports Recruits that's part of our coaches organization that's all across collegiate women's lacrosse that's offered as a free platform, which is Sports Recruits, but it's not something you have to pay for. And I think that is the one thing I would say is you don't need to pay for any of those opportunities. I do think being able, at least in our sport, with club coaches, with high school coaches that can advocate for you. And again, just being able to communicate directly with us. And I would always say kind of spend the money to be able to go to those universities or be in front of those coaches as much as you can is the most important.
Yeah, I would agree. If it costs whatever it costs to take advantage of a third party, use that money to attend 4 camps or whatever that may be. Each sport might be different. I know baseball, there's organizations such as Perfect Game, which is a large tournament provider, but they run essentially a database on players where players can store information such as video, metrics, baseball radar gun reading or now exit velocity, things like that. So that, at least I use that as a college coach because we could then easily access information on somebody in California, for example. His name comes across our desk. Okay, let's look up Joe Kinney in Pasadena, California. All right, he's doing this and this. That doesn't mean it's gospel, but maybe we want to look into him a little bit more. So that was sort of beneficial from my perspective. But the third party services you can do, as you both clearly identified, individual student athletes along with their parents can do the work themselves. Great, thank you. Any guidance on video students send you?
I can go first. I do think it's really helpful. I think that certainly, at least in our sport, that's a pretty like fluid, free flowing sport. I think being able to show kind of some snippets of time. So even if like you kind of you dodge to the cage and you maybe don't make that shot, like what do you look like in terms of your movement, your reaction time? I think it doesn't need to be super long, just because I think a lot of times we want to be able to open a video and again, just assess some of your movements pretty quickly. And I think that we're not making decisions off of video, but I think it is piquing interest and can be really helpful to maybe say, hey, okay, let's make sure we try to see this kid live, or has anyone just followed up with their high school or their club coach. So I do think with the video, it is beneficial. It should be easy to be able to click on the link and access it. Again, whether it's YouTube or kind of any of the servers, but I do think that you want to be able to showcase your strongest ability within the first little 30 seconds of the clip.
Dennis, your thoughts?
Yeah, similar, 3, 4, 5 minutes max. I always like kind of just when the different movements or the different actions are together. So whether it be in soccer, shots or crosses or headers or, whatever it might be, kind of they're all put in alignment with each other. So you can kind of maybe see a little bit of a pattern of somebody's skill set. So, putting those different pieces of whatever sport you play together in the reel. But I would say holding off on any kind of full game or half a game video unless the coach requests it. If you have access to it, maybe in the email, say, hey, coach, here's my highlight film. I have full games if you're interested, but don't start off with the full games. Definitely start out with in my recommendation, start out with a little bit of 3, 4 minute more highlights.
Yeah, and I would add to highlight on what you just said, short and sweet and no fluff, right? No on music. I'm coaching at the Naval Academy. This is probably 1993, and we were getting VHS tapes back then. And this guy sends me a video, and it's like got funeral home music, no joke, like set to his workout. And I'm like, what's going on here? We're watching this video. And needless to say, we moved on to somebody else. You also don't need to see the video of somebody lifting weights, something that's not relevant to the sport. Keep it short and sweet. And then as Coach Bond just indicated, if the coach requests more, some live footage, then you can add that. And it's going to be a little bit sport to sport specific. Okay. Student athlete goes to a large event, probably not your camp, but a combine, a large ID camp, prospect camp, whatever it might be, say 250 student athletes, give or take. How can that student athlete stand out? Dennis, I'll have you go first on that one.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean it's tough. My big thing, at least in those environments, is that if you have something that you're really good at, you better be able to show that skill, right? So whether in my word or in basketball these days in the NBA or whatever, it's like a specialist. Like if you have a really good left foot, you better show off that left foot. If you're really good in the air, then you better show off that you can do that. If you can punt the ball really far and you're a goalie, then you better do it. So it's like, what if you're fast, you better use your speed. So it's like, kind of being able to use your strength. And I understand, like back in the day when I was growing up, my dad would be like, you got to work on your weaknesses. Like nowadays, I think it's like, no, have a super specialty. And that's going to jump off the radar because then we as a coaching staff know that we can rely on that to maybe come in and be something different in our toolbox of what we call our roster. So
Like when
Great answer. Lauren, what would you say?
Kobe Bryant went to LaSalle's basketball camp and only played with his left hand for the whole time. I think those times are a little bit different, but I think the one thing that is helpful, at least for someone that's emailed us like pretty consistently, and it's in their kind of recruiting cycle, is even like if they're rotating stations or they finished a water break of just coming up to say, hi coach, I'm so and so, I'm interested. I think that again, we evaluate and like we do camps just as Patriot League coaches together. So a lot of times if it's the same kid, you're like, okay, what do they really BU is a little bit different campus wise than Lafayette and things like that. So I think that it is helpful at times if it is a school you're genuinely interested in to be able to just introduce yourself at a water break. Certainly the end of camp, a lot of people come up, but I do think that putting a face to the name can be really helpful. And especially at the beginning of a camp or in the middle, I can easily recognize like, oh, okay, now I can make sure to watch that kid or keep an eye on that person, which I think is helpful.
And
So
Coach
quick story.
Kinney, I would
Go
say,
ahead.
if it is a camp, more so, but even in a club tournament or a high school game, the interaction, I mean, you can't, I guess I should have maybe brought it up. Maybe everybody doesn't know it, but your interaction with an official, with your teammates, with your coaches, all of those things are, as I said earlier, when we talk about our kind of guy, we're just as focused on that, if not more, than the specialty skills I was talking about earlier. So, we X more people off the list when we go to tournaments and camps than we do add onto the list. That's for sure. And so those behaviors and interactions are definitely things that we're always keeping an eye out for, and always things that we're watching as a staff.
I think this is
Right.
the biggest area where parents can ruin opportunities sometimes. Where, I mean, we've recruited every weekend in November. We were in Florida at the end of November. And again, as coaches, we don't always sit, at least the way our tournaments run. Sometimes we're on the bench side between the players' benches. Sometimes we're mixed in the sand. Sometimes we have gear on, sometimes we don't. And I think when you hear parents, whether it's kind of coaching their kid, yelling at their kid, or just like there's so many different dynamics that we're in the bathroom and we hear a lot of things. I definitely agree with Dennis that I think that there's times, and I said to my assistants and my staff, just like we have to figure out what number this kid's parent is, because I do think it is an unfortunate situation. But we recruit the whole family, so.
That's tremendous insight. Thank you. How about social media? Do you use it? Is it evaluated? Is it part of the recruiting process to assess a student athlete? And kind of connected, do you look at student social media to learn more about the student as a person? Lauren.
Absolutely. I think the social media from some programs can give you an insight. I think nowadays, just in terms of kind of what teams are doing, how they spend their time, certainly some programs have more kind of digital media groups and support, I would say, than others do. But I do think that you can learn, just like you said, Joe, the information from teams, kind of whether it's Instagram accounts or things like that. So I do think it's a way to learn about a program. I do think that always will follow a prospect on social media to be able to see, again, just what does it look like? How do they carry themselves? And I think that my staff, they have TikTok. I do not have TikTok, so I'll ask them to check their TikTok if they're able to. There are certain things that I've definitely aged out of, but I do think just in terms of their presence and how they carry themselves, it's a conversation we have with our verbal commits. Okay, once you commit to us, even verbally, you're still representing BU lacrosse, and so I do think that is really an important conversation, and love that. I tell our team all the time, I'm like, the confidence you have in your TikTok dances, I want you to bring to the field. I want you to kind of carry that confidence all the time. So I do think it can show their personality in a really neat way. But I do think it's important that they understand that it is kind of their brand in some sense.
Dennis, do you communicate with high school or club coaches? I think I probably know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt we follow up on references, and we even try to track down people that recruits don't put down as a reference, right, and connect the dots. People don't know how many branches of former assistants that we may have, or people that we worked with, or people that we played with even back in the day. So, if we know there's someone from a geographic area or a certain school or a certain club, and there's any type of connection in that area or at that organization, we will be reaching out. We will definitely follow up on the references that a recruit may give us, but there's no doubt we're calling way more people than just those on that list. And one of my big ones is I do, before we offer a player, I do ask my assistants to call their guidance counselor, their academic guidance counselor. So we do a pretty deep dive on someone's background, including social media, before we really would aggressively move forward with a full offer.
Yeah, I would either myself or an assistant make sure we talk to the high school coach at a minimum, prior to offering. And often one of the first questions I asked the high school coach was, tell me about the parents. What's that dynamic like in your program? Just so I have a sense of what's going on. Okay, going to change gears here a little bit. I'm sure I know student athletes reach out to you. So can student athletes email, text, call you? What do you prefer? And then let's maybe just talk about like what a phone call or an email looks like, what you would expect or what you would like to see with communications. Dennis, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, typically we start with an initial email. It's kind of the first connection contact. Maybe if we see a kid, and depending on the timing of the process, there may be a text to then set up a phone call. Typically, a phone call is not the first point of contact. It might be the second or third. Once the first initial call happens, which would be I would say a casual interview, I guess, just kind of picking, hopefully they have questions for me or our staff. We definitely will have questions for them, just more generic about life and just trying to figure out their personality. Is then anything moving forward from there, a lot of it's done, at least for our staff, through text, setting up a visit or, hey, we need you to get your transcripts over, or can you get us the cell phone number of a coach, or when's your next game? So, self calls are happen, but I would say more often than not, email starts it, call shortly after, and then once we feel like we've built a little bit of a rapport, a lot of the just generic back and forth is via text.
Lauren, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would recommend that I actually heard someone say this summer. So in women's lacrosse, September 1st is our start date. And again, most of the time it starts with kind of emails and phone calls. But I think that especially for young people who maybe aren't as familiar being on the phone these days, I think that leading up to that, I heard someone recommend like get used to being on the phone. Call your mom's uncle or call someone, get someone that kind of you are a little like you're not super close to, but you're at least working on kind of being able to carry a conversation over the phone. I think that was something just as our kind of recruitment process has progressed. I do think you understand and get that sense of personality and who's comfortable on the phone and who maybe isn't. I think certainly I'm comfortable texting as the process evolves. I do think that emails can become, especially I know like Dennis is a fall sport, and even the beginning of the school year with there's a lot going on with our teams on campus. I think that like you can definitely evolve to texting, but I do think that being comfortable on the phone is probably one of the most important things I would recommend for kind of students that are freshmen and sophomores leading into their junior and senior years in their recruiting process.
And I would
Yeah,
say,
that's great.
Joe, more often than not, we meet not only the recruit but their parents via Zoom before we'll ever meet them face to face on campus. And so then, as you spoke about numerous times, the positivity that we may get from that interaction, or the not so positive
Yeah.
interaction, kind of would even potentially lead to us saying, let's get that young man up to campus, or let's not get that young man up to campus. So the Zoom has become very prevalent too, as a first contact, and meeting the parents that way is another way for us to start to paint that picture I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. A picture is worth the times 1,000 words. And having had many of these phone calls, it's a one-way conversation or a conversation that just has one-word responses. It's kind of difficult to carry on that conversation, and you're really left wondering, what am I doing here? So, the advice about working your ability to converse on the phone, which most people, young people today, probably don't do. That's tremendous advice. So thank you. All right, visits, official and unofficial visits. I'm sure you offer them. How early in the process? Maybe just talk in general terms what that might look like. Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, we're probably a lot farther behind than women's lacrosse when it comes to those type of things. We will start to bring kids up to campus in what I would say spring of junior year. That, for us, that's even early at times. So, we're probably identifying kids November, December, January, starting to interact January, February, visits March, April, May. And then with the hope that we would get commitments in June or July going into senior year. But then we still will then have visits and still be recruiting even as of today, December of senior year. So ours goes a little later, but probably, and also pretty lengthy 12-month process, I would say, from December junior year to December, January senior year.
Lauren?
Yeah, I would say I think this is definitely a sport to sport thing. There's certain sports where kind of it's really only official visits. I think that for us, our kind of in-person recruiting starts September 1st of junior year. So that is where you certainly will have offers for both officials and unofficials. I do think we tend to be able to have that conversation with the prospect and their family of just, again, what does the financial circumstances look like to be able to make it to campus, understanding of kind of, do they, if they express they want an official visit, why is that? I think sometimes it's, well, I want an official visit because it sounds cool to take an official visit, but you can only go to one place. So for instance, for us, a lot of our class of 2025, our committed current senior class, they'll take their official visit in senior year once they have already signed. And that's where we were able to bring them together on campus as a class because our process is a little bit more accelerated. But I do think that unofficial visits, you can still do the rules are pretty open right now in the sense that you can, on an unofficial visit, meet the team, still go and have a meal with the team and just pay for your own meal, get to watch a practice, get to meet with the staff. So there is a lot that you are still able to learn. It's just a matter of kind of what is the familiarity with the coach and what is their typical process. I know we have a rowing program here that only wants to bring people in on official visits because it allows them to spend a full 48 hours with team members, and they can get a really good sense in that senior year of what that prospect is like. So I do think it depends sport to sport, but for us, for the most part, unofficial visits is definitely what we tend to lean to. And then it's becoming more popular to do the official visits starting in junior year in that fall semester.
And Dennis, you kind of touched on this with the Zoom. I would imagine you both are evaluating student athletes and their families when they're visiting you.
Oh yeah, 100%. I
Meaning,
think the visit and the overnight is huge on both for both parties, right? Like you, in one of the questions you had on the piece of paper, was it finding out about a team's culture, right? There's no better way to find out about a team's culture than for you to come and spend, as Lauren said, 24, 48 hours around the team, going to meals, being in the locker room, going to class, hanging out with them at night, playing video games, whatever it might be for guys. So it's beneficial in both directions, but there's no doubt we're asking our players what they thought of the student athlete when they were on campus. When we take the families on tours, what kind of questions are they asking? How are they behaving? How are they acting? Kind of what's going on? All of those things are part of the process. And so, I always say I'm in my office right now, so that 30 minutes or 60 minutes, wherever that might be organized on an unofficial visit or official visit, is way more important in the recruiting process than any game or any play I could see a kid do athletically. That is really, really important to me. And just, again, really part of our main philosophy is kind of trying to see if it's the right fit.
great, thank you. At what stage do you bring admissions, or do you start communicating with admissions in the recruiting process? And I guess by extension, then, do you do a pre-read or an early read or whatever your school calls it? Lauren?
Yeah, I think definitely every school is different. I think that I've been at some universities where the coach wasn't able to make an offer until there has been kind of a pre-read done through the admissions department. Currently, in kind of even when I was at Duke, our head coach had been there for about 27 years, and so she was able to look at a transcript, get a sense of with kind of testing and rigor if someone would be a fit, and being able to have, again, for us, like when we're looking at a junior fall transcript with only freshman and sophomore year, we're able to help say, okay, you will need to remain in these AP classes. So I think that based on our process now, we do a pre-read process at the end of junior year. So once they have 6 kind of full semesters of high school, that's when we will do the official kind of admissions read. But those usually are done if we can easily send along a transcript and say, hey, how does this look? What do you feel about this? I think most of us have really good experience, whether it's with international students, whether it's just being able to look at rigor and transcripts and get a good sense of who is a fit. But we do usually typically wait until the end of that junior year.
Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an art, not a science, up until that official read is done, but we will we would we would we would evaluate it before we would make anybody spend time or money to come visit. We want it, we want to just have somebody come here, especially face to face, and put that effort in if we didn't think it was the right fit. And as far as guaranteeing admission, we would never offer scholarship money unless we could guarantee admission along with the scholarship offer.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Um, do you make verbal offers to student athletes? And if so, do you ask for a verbal commitment? So obviously this will be before signing dates. That's sort of changed a little bit, but maybe we'll cover that in a little bit if we have time. So earlier in the process, before they would actually sign a financial aid agreement. Lauren.
Yeah, so we again, to give a little bit of context, so the class of 2026, our recruiting class, the high school graduates of 26. So we have 7 verbal commitments in that class. Again, I think that our sport's probably one of the most accelerated. But I think that I do think that again, it's something that I will say, it is sport to sport. My husband was a college football coach, and he's like, in football, verbal commitment meant nothing. Like kids would verbally commit to a few places. So I do think that each sports landscape is a little bit different. I do think on our end, we communicate, okay, if you're going to verbally commit to us, we're committing this spot to you. This is what we anticipate admissions looking like, and kind of really being direct with kind of the metrics they would have to continue to hit academically. I think that's really important. But I think that we do in some, and you certainly see players now change those commitments, and or continue to reopen their commitment, or reopen their recruiting process, excuse me. So I do think that a verb understanding kind of the landscape of the sport that they're playing is important.
Dennis, anything to add on that?
Lauren, I don't even know the names of 7 2026 soccer players, let alone have 7 commits.
Sorry.
Um, so yeah, I mean, we do verbal commitments. You would imagine, Joe, or anybody on the call, like once that is done, we expect the kid to go on their social media and say, I just committed to Lafayette. One of our things on the phone when they commit to us is we say, can you please call all the other coaches that you've been speaking with and let them know of your decision that you're going to Lafayette? And then probably one of them is one of my friends. And then they'll text me and be like, oh, you got Joe Kinney, good get, so, there's a lot of ways for kids then to publicly make it be known, even if they're not necessarily signing something. And in our sport, thankfully, one, the timing isn't very early, and two, we are very ethical, I would say, as a group, that when somebody verbally commits, not like football, are we then still calling the kid or still trying to get the kid to change their mind. So at least that's a positive in the men's soccer world. And so we rarely, not just at Lafayette, but across the board, even at the highest of levels, have kids back out of their verbal commitment once it's done, no matter how early that is in soccer. The one thing we do, Joe, and every school is different. I don't know how Lauren handles it, but if a family wants a financial offer, we put a deadline date to it. And so what I do is I don't have open offers. What we do is we'll pinpoint a position or an amount of money. We'll tell that family, if you want this offer, give us a date. And then they might say 2 months. And I say, no, that's too long. And I say 2 weeks. And they say, that's too soon. And then we say, all right, I'll give it to you for a month. And then I'll hold and guarantee that money for that month. But if they don't commit to that money in a month, then the day after that month is over, that money's getting offered to somebody else. Where some college coaches, depending on the sport, might put that money out to 10 families at the same time and say, first come, first serve.
First serve,
Whoever comes back gets the money first. And so we don't do it that way. We designate a guaranteed money for a designated length of time, and then we either get the kid, or we get the commit, or we don't.
Thank you for sharing that. So you're both Division I scholarship sports. Do you have walk-ons? Do you offer walk-on spots, or do you offer roster spots to non-scholarship players? And then sort of by extension, do you have a walk-on process / tryout process? Lauren.
We do. I mean, every place I've been, even as an assistant, we offer a walk-on process. I think that one of the things that potentially may change with the landscape is roster size. So that is something we do have to take into consideration, where walk-ons may be impacted. But I know we have always found kind of every once in a while a player who says, listen, I chose BU, or my recruiting process didn't necessarily go the way I wanted to, or I maybe got injured in my recruiting year. And I think that if they love the university, same thing when I was at Duke and Georgetown, there were always players who we had try out or reached out, and we were able to watch them in maybe their senior spring, and then say, yes, we'd love to offer you a spot on the team. Or so that is something that I do think that players kind of find you in different ways. And we say a lot, kind of however their journey took them and got them here, that certainly is a part of the program. They can be really impactful players that just had a different journey and different path.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to win every game I coached, and I did not, but I'll go with the players I have. I don't care how they got there. If I recruited them all, great. If they happen to show up on campus, that's great too. And I think most coaches, they want to win, doing it the right way, of course. And if they're fortunate enough to get some players that maybe showed up or reached out to you before the year, so be it.
Joe, quick history lesson. We don't have walk-ons anymore because of Title IX and our roster limits on the men's side. Most of our female sports, like Lauren, can have our AD wish they had 50 on the team or 150 on the team, right? So on the men's side, it's much more limited when it comes to walk-on
Yeah,
opportunities.
good point.
But when we had a larger roster size and we were able to bring on what you call our walk-ons, we do have a lot of non-scholarship players. So half of our roster probably gets athletic money. Half our roster were recruited but don't get athletic money. But walk-ons, probably the last or one of the last walk-ons I had was a Pingry alum. How do you like that?
Huh.
Nick Kiella, that you brought it up, I just brought it to my mind, but Nick Kiella started on our 2003 championship team as a walk-on from Pingry, and he had played soccer and ice hockey at Pingry, was coming to Lafayette, whether we took him or not. We let him walk on, and by senior year, he started on a championship team. So I wish we had walk-ons because I wish I had more Nick Kiellas, but unfortunately, those days are over, at least right now.
Thank you for sharing that. We're winding down here, so I'm just going to throw each of you a question here to kind of wrap up. Lauren, this could probably take an entire 3-hour Zoom, but transfer portal, name, image, likeness, does it come up in recruiting?
It does. I think certainly the transfer portal the last few years has been impactful with players having an additional year. I think that's something people are always surprised by in the Patriot League is that we can't take outside fifth years. And so I think that was, I think, asking just how a program uses the portal is a really important question that I do think both prospects and families can ask is just how do you use the portal? How do you anticipate using the portal? I think the same thing with NIL opportunities. I think that understanding again, what are the opportunities that are potentially afforded for NIL just for the players, again, on their own. I think that nowadays, certain young people have brands and things that they can kind of market themselves with. And so I think that just understanding the landscape at that university of just what education's provided, I think those are also things the students can find on social media already. You can see a lot of the NIL information is in terms of like what athletes and kind of through their social media channels are they promoting products, are they connected to brands and things like that. So I would say we had more transfer portal questions and just asking the coach directly and looking. That's something you can look on the roster. You can see, do they have that people have transferred in, and what year are they freshmen coming in, or are they bringing in a lot of fifth years? So I do think looking at the rosters can be really impactful. I think NLI will continue to evolve. I think we are definitely at an educational institution first and foremost, and I think understanding that piece of kind of I think our sport's a little bit different than maybe some of the big NIL sports right now in basketball, football, gymnastics, and things like that. So I think just understanding that landscape and kind of what the player wants out of that NIL, kind of that question in that sense of what they want is important to know.
Okay, thank you. Dennis, any red flags that would give you pause or cause you to stop recruiting somebody?
Red flag.
I mean, the obvious, the person gets arrested or whatever,
Right.
murder, that's certainly a red flag.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, a sneaky one that I'm always that over the years I've always been kind of prone to dig a little deeper on is when a family comes into the office or we're visiting via Zoom or whatever, and the family says negative things about their current coaches. So now put that in perspective. Like you're a doctor, and then you
It's
go in and
tremendous you
the
brought that up.
person just rips on all the doctors they've ever seen. So they're probably ripping on all the doctors they've ever met. They're probably walking out of the office ripping on me too. So it's like, if you're ripping on people that do our profession, we understand that a high school coach maybe doesn't have a ton of experience. They're doing it because they're a teacher at the school, maybe not at Pingry, but at public schools. And then there's this family bashing the coach. So, and again, I may think the coach stinks too, but to go out and publicly do it, I just think is something that's a red flag, because if you're doing it about your club coach, if you're doing it about your high school coach, then there's a good chance the first time we lose a game, parents are in the stands and the kid's probably walking back to his car shitting on me, you know what I mean? So it's like that's definitely one that puts an antenna up that most parents probably and kids don't even think about. They just think they're being honest, but you just got to be careful about that piece of it, because that's there's a lot of connections between the behavior there in high school and probably the behavior that happens in college.
Great advice. All right, last question for each of you. What is the single biggest piece of advice you can offer to high school student athletes about the recruiting process? Lauren.
I think as much as you can kind of share your story and kind of why you want to be at that respective university. I think that, for instance, this fall we had a prospect in, and I asked some unique questions. I asked like, what would your siblings say about you? I asked kind of what's one of the most challenging things you've had to face, and she was really hesitant, looked at her parents and wasn't sure if she should share it. And she was diagnosed with diabetes a few years ago. I said to her, I was like, you've had to mature faster. It's like, this is actually makes you more enticing to us because you've had to handle something really hard as a high schooler. That's not the easiest thing, and you've had to mature and understand how to take care of your body and things like that. And so that for us, I think just being able to share kind of your journey in some sense, and that not everything is perfect, but that you it's kind of made for, in that situation for us, it made her unique, that okay, she's had to grow up, she's had to think everything hasn't been easy for her. And so I think just being able to kind of share your story, share why specifically that university, that team, you feel like would be a fit for you, and being able to just learn the most about all the opportunities they have. I think there are so many different schools out there, which is really important. It's just finding the best fit and the best opportunity. And again, whether it's Division 1, 2, 3, NAI, hard work is hard work. Like playing a collegiate sport, you're going to work hard no matter what level you go to. But I think being able to find the fit where you align with the vision with the staff and the team is really important.
Great. Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, and this is since I was a little kid, Joe, and I've been doing it now, I've been doing this for a long time. Athletics is a key to education, and then education is a key to your future. Like my parents taught me that since I was like literally in elementary school, right? Like, so when I went to college, I would have never gotten in Columbia if it wasn't for sports. But I had a God-given talent. It opened a door for me that would change the rest of my life, right? Like every time a student gets into Lafayette, the majority, a large percentage of the guys I've ever coached in my 27 years would have never gotten in Lafayette if it wasn't for soccer. They took advantage of that opportunity, and now that possibly changed the trajectory of their life. I say that recruiting and your academics at Pingry or anything you do, there's 1,000, I use this analogy, 1,000 doors. You don't want any of those doors locked because you don't know what's behind those doors. But if you socially get in trouble, or you academically don't reach your full potential, if you don't try to do the best you can in school, you're locking those doors. And then when you want to see what's behind that door, you can't see it because you locked it based on your prior actions or behavior or effort. And so for me, this idea of using athletics as a way to not only enjoy the sport, because we all are passionate about the sport we play, I'm sure, and we all are competitors and want to win, but using it in an avenue that's going to be able to affect your life when you can't play that sport anymore. And I've seen it in a very powerful way at the institutions I went to and have coached at, where you literally are changing people, that sports is changing people's lives, not because of the sport they're playing, but because of the opportunity that the sport is giving them. And if you can see that through the lens of recruiting, then a lot of players choosing a Division III school for a better education rather than a Division I school is something I compliment all the time. And I think that's probably the right decision. If you said 2% of kids are getting athletic scholarships, Joe, what's the percentage of kids that are ever going to play pro sports, right? So it's like, what's the one thing you can walk out of college, no matter where you went, no matter what sport you played? That's a degree that nobody for the rest of your life will take away from you. And as my college coach, I'll leave you on this. My college coach, I walked in the office the first time. My parents, as soon as I walked out, said, "You're probably going there." He said, "It's not about the next 4 years. It's about the next 40 years." And so that idea of using the recruiting process and the sport that you play in that way of getting an education, and maybe an education that you can never even dream of, is one I'm a big believer of.
That's tremendous. On that note, I'm going to start to wrap it up here. Dennis, Lauren, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedules to spend with us tonight. I appreciate that. I respect both what you do. I think you both know that. And Lauren, to see you become a head coach, and Dennis, obviously, to surpass my time at Lafayette now, that's very impressive. You're coaching your son, who attended my camps forever. Maybe your other son as he gets up there. Best of luck to both of you. Happy holidays. And to wrap it up for our audience, thank you for attending. I appreciate it very much. Please know your student athletes have a tremendous amount of resources at Pingry to support them in the recruiting process. They can meet with me whenever they like. Our college counseling office is well-versed in the recruiting process. 4 of us played college sports. 2 of us were Division I coaches. Pingry coaching staff, very experienced. A lot of coaches have been here a long time and have sent many student athletes on to play in college. And in some cases, they've participated in college athletics themselves. Your club coaches certainly are going to be a part of the process. So please reach out. And the last thing, our website, if you go to pingry.org and click on athletics under the experience tab, it's Go Big Blue, I think, at pingry.org or .pingry.org. We have a college recruiting tab that has a wealth of information and resources, including NCAA eligibility, center information, which is something you need if you're going to play Division I. We can help you out with that, or I can help you out with that. There's a guide for the college-bound student athlete that has a wealth of information, some timelines. We have some testaments from former student athletes just talking about their recruiting experiences. So it's a wealth of information at your fingertips that can answer at least a lot of questions early in the process. With that, if you are any follow-up questions, just shoot me an email, jkinney@pingry.org, and I'll be happy to follow up. Again, Dennis, Lauren, I can't thank you enough. Have a great night. Happy holidays to everybody, and best of luck in our future endeavors. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. See.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.